Welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, and today we're talking about spring equinox. And my fellow astrologers, friends, is Robert Pacetti, Madam Simon, and Justin Crockett Elzie. Welcome. Thanks everybody for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So Madam Simon is an archetypal astrologer, tarot reader, and visionary artist. Website is iconalchemy.com. I'm an astrologer, author, intuitive, and tarot reader, and my website is alightpath.com. Justin Crockett Elzie is an archetypal and Jyotish astrologer, teacher, and author, and you can reach Justin at his email, justin.elzie@gmail.com. And Robert is a consulting astrologer, vibrational and psychological techniques, and his website is deepearthastrology.com, and hopefully I got those all right. And here we have a piece of art for spring equinox from Madam Simon, and I'll let her tell you about her piece of art.
Thank you, Liz. This is a digital collage. And I actually did this a couple of years ago when Mars was in Aries. So I thought it quite appropriate for the spring equinox.
Well,
and I like all the colors.
It's beautiful. And it's not AI, right?
Nope. Heck no. No.
Great.
And Justin has a quote for us, so go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, so I, looked at, all these things that we're going to be talking about today, and, we're in this period where there's a lot that we can't control. So I really love this quote by H. Jackson Brown Jr. He's an American writer, and he says, "When you can't change the direction of the wind, you adjust your sails." So I thought that was just something to kind of think about as we go through these turbulent seas and time,
Yes, I love that. And making those adjustments, I oftentimes refer to the astrological weather as like a sailboat.
It makes a lot of sense because we're going to be moving from big, heavy Pisces energy to big, heavy Aries energy over the next couple of months.
Fiery and aggressive, exactly.
So we're at the spring equinox, Aries ingress. Aries ingresses into, or the sun ingresses into Aries at 0 degrees Aries. So Simon, you want to start us out with this slide?
Oh, well, that would be bighorn ram, I believe. Rams are the symbol for Aries. Equinoxes are twice a year, around March 20th and September 22nd. And the Aries equinox happens, as Liz said, when the sun enters 0 degrees Aries and crosses the celestial equator.
Thank you. And Robert, you want to start us off about some things about Aries?
Yeah, it's a cardinal sign. It's an initiating sign. It's very creative. It initiates you. There's the forward motion of leadership. It's visionary in terms of getting things started, and it begins the cycle of the year. For me and many astrologers, this is the beginning of the year. It is ruled by Mars. It's the diurnal form of Mars, and it is a fire element. It is the mantra of I am. And the key words are they are trailblazers. They're active, adventurous, they're determined. It's about new beginnings, the pioneering spirit, and enterprising, the ability to think on your feet and move forward. Now, there are some, cautions with Aries, and that they can be a bit aggressive sometimes, antagonistic, argumentative, and chaotic. But as a Leo, I love my Aries brethren out there, starting the fires.
Simon, would you like to add anything? Because I know you have an Aries moon.
I do have an Aries moon. One thing I will say about Aries is that they can be impulsive. Rick Levine, who has multiple Aries placements, if I recall correctly, likes to say that Aries energy is ready, fire, aim.
Justin, do you want to add anything?
No, I think they got it covered, being their fire signs.
Okay, Justin, I'll let you do the mundane rules.
Sure. So when we look at mundane astrology, it's the astrology of governments and societies, and collective. And with the Aries ingress, being an important event in the mundane and world astrology, gives us an outlook what the coming year looks like based on what houses the planets are in. And so we look towards the sign of the ascendant of the ingress chart to how long the chart is good for. So with fixed signs, it's it's good for a year. If it's a mutable sign, it's for 6 months, and a cardinal sign is good for 3 months.
Anybody want to add anything?
I think with mutable charts, especially, that mutable nature carries through. And as we go through the rest of the solar events through the year, the solstices and the equinoxes, we're going to see some tweaks and changes to how things kind of present themselves through the year.
Yeah, I think it might be good to also say right up front. So the chart that we'll be looking at today for the world chart, because it's Greenwich in the UK, is the ascendant is Leo, so it's a fixed sign chart. But the chart near the end that we do have a chart for the United States on the Aries ingress, and it actually, the ascendant is Gemini, so it's mutable. So it'll give us definitely a good idea of what the next 6 months will look like, and maybe how it kind of peters out as we get towards the midterms.
And when we're talking about mundane astrology, really we base it around their capital city, right, Justin? Like
yes,
the capital city of the country.
Yeah.
So whatever the ascendant is for the capital city of the country, it's going to change, as we go around the globe. Each country we're dealing with may have a different ascendant, which would change the nature of the chart and the placement of the planets within the houses.
Right. But it's interesting. The planets are still in the same signs. So it'll be maybe, one country's dealing more maybe with, if the sun is in the 11th house versus, some other house, it may be a difference of where, how a country reacts to particular events that affect us all.
Mm-hmm.
So, Justin, you want to continue with the first 6 houses of the houses in the mundane chart?
Sure. So there are themes that go with the houses in mundane astrology. In the first house, whatever the house is in the house represents the country and inhabitants. So that can be how people are going to react. Second house for in a mundane chart represents resource stuff, of course. So it's bank, stock market, and trade. Third house, communications and travel, of course, represents transportation, mail or postal communications in the country. Fourth house, and you might want to think about how this it can elaborate on that. So when we think about communications, this also can be media companies, social media companies, and computer companies, any tools that are tools of communication. Fourth house is land, crops, mines, and buildings. Fifth house is entertainment, children, also representative of the Senate portion of Congress. And the sixth house is, of course, the house of the health of the public. So it can represent the NIH and also civil service employees and unions, because it's the house of work.
Madam Simon, will you do the next 6 houses, please?
Sure. So the 7th house can represent foreign policy because, of course, it is the house of the other, right? And that foreign policy can be both political and commercial, right? There tends to be some overlap with some of these houses. I mean, you could say, for example, that the 3rd house has some commerce involved in it as well. Also, this 7th house, the 8th house, there's finance, including, of course, tariffs. And the 9th house, we see shipping, because obviously that goes to other countries, right? The 9th house governs things that are foreign, or travel in particular to other lands, but also courts. Judicial rulings we might see there, as well as universities. The 10th house represents presidents, authority figures, the reputation of the country, the leadership, right? The 11th house Here we see in the United States, it would be the House of Representatives, that portion of Congress, but also legislation that is passed. I would also remind people, though, that the 11th house is traditionally associated with causes. And so I suspect we would see NGOs and activist groups here as well. And then finally, the 12th house, prisons, criminals, the welfare state, anything where people are in some way confined. And I would actually add hospitals to that as well.
Robert, would you like to add anything to any of those?
The 12th also has government secrets. And that's a big one, I think. And we're going to see that play out a little bit.
Thank you for adding that. Okay, Justin, you want to do the planets and mundane chart?
Sure. So we can look at some themes for each of the planets. So the sun can represent authority figures. The moon can represent the public's mood or where their attention is at, because it does relate to our emotions and our sense of security. Mercury can represent media, trade, or again, mail or postal issues. Venus, women's issues or the arts. Mars, of course, military and conflicts. Jupiter can represent law, our judicial system, country's judicial system or religion. Saturn can represent the elderly or farmers. And Uranus can represent political tension and riots and change. Any type of change that's going on there with movements. And then, of course, Neptune can represent vice or fraud in the collective. And that could be anywhere within the different houses. And then, of course, Pluto represents a significant change in violence and regeneration.
Robert, do you want to add anything?
Only the fact that for every chart on the planet, we're going to be seeing a conjunction between the sun and Neptune. And that's going to be a theme throughout. Authority figures, vice, and fraud.
Simon, do you want to add anything?
I would add that Pluto also is definitely tied to the oligarchy. And there was something else that I was thinking about, but yes, the moon. As Justin said, it can represent the public's mood and where the attention is, but I like to think of it very much as the will of the people.
Thank you. So here we have the spring equinox Aries ingress for universal time at Greenwich, UK. So we have the sun in the 8th house, the ascendant's at 24 Leo, the midheaven is at 12 degrees Taurus on March 20th at 2:46 p.m. universal time. So this is like a chart for the world, the energy of the world. Any other comments? Okay, well, here's the aspects to the sun. We have the sun conjunct Saturn and Neptune, sextile Uranus and Juno, and square Hygeia. So, Robert, you want to start?
Well, I think that just the overall theme is going to be other countries' things and what we're doing with them. And that's really going to be a big idea throughout the world. It's really going to be, I think, a rebalancing of allies, what we need from allies, what their resources look like, and how we connect to them.
Justin?
Yeah, I would definitely agree that there's well, you've been hearing some of these leaders like Carney from Canada and some others talking about a reordering of the world order and the structure. And I think that a large part of that, I agree with what Robert's saying, especially around finance with countries. And I think that's going to continue to be a big issue. And and it's interesting that Mars is there as well, representing some conflict in that area. I think that'll continue to be a focus worldwide.
Madam Simon?
There's two things that really leap out at me about that Sun-Neptune conjunction, one of which is leaders who are driven by ideology, and the other is water rights.
Mhm.
That is the big thing that leaps out at me. Concern over water rights. I know that here in the American Southwest, it's a big deal. Um, uh, with regard to the states of Colorado and Arizona and California and New Mexico, they are all having concerns about who is using what amount of water. I also know that water privatization has been a big deal, not just here in the United States, but elsewhere. So I think that's going to become increasingly of concern, especially as climate change continues to ramp up.
Go ahead.
If I may, I was going to add something there that, when we look at that Sun-Neptune conjunction, which Robert has pointed out before, is, that Neptune has in Aries, there's about some sense of fraud. And so we got the authority figures with fraud, with finance coming out. And the fact that it sextiles Uranus in the 10th house tells me that that not everybody's going to get away with it. There's going to be some change in leadership or people rising up against it, because Uranus is in the 10th house there. And anytime Uranus is in a house where there's leaders, that means there'll be some change of leadership. But this is not the United States necessarily. This is the world. So, and I think the fact that it's sextiling that Sun, Neptune, and in the 8th house, meaning there's fraud and criminal enterprises, which we already see a lot of, that it will continue to be a theme, and that there'll be some leaders that lose their positions over it.
Madam Simon, would you like to talk about the square to Hygeia?
But first, before we discuss that, I do want to mention that sextile to Juno. Because Juno very much is about, our kind of institutionalized relationships, okay, our commitments. And I have come to really associate her with the social contract, okay? And so then when we see the Sun with Neptune there, and there are those questions of vice and fraud, that in turn causes us to reconsider the social contract. Now, it's sextile, so therefore, there is perhaps a bit more support for coming out of all of that murky Neptunian vice or deception, and still maintaining some sense of social order or social contract. But I do think that it's really important to pay attention to how is the social contract being shifted by the events that we're seeing, including when it comes to public trust. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And as far as Hygeia, I think that has a lot to do with national purity and what people think about the country. And I think that we are going to be seeing a conflict between the leaders and the legislation about how they want to present and how they want to embody the country and its motion forward. And there's going to be a lot of talk about that, a lot of chatter. And, we can already see the undercurrents of that right now, with some people in certain parties breaking away from the leader and saying, we need to have a dialogue about who we are, what we are as a country, and how we're going to act as a country, and them saying we have some say here.
I have to agree. I think that's definitely relates to social as well, because if you look at the Sabian symbol for that degree of Hygeia, and you look at the lunar mansion in the Nakshatra, the Vedic that it's in, it has this theme, and both of them are agreeing that's about socialness. Mm-hmm. And so the Sabian symbol is about this gypsy in the forest that comes out of the forest and tries to engage in the greater collective. And so there's some question here, because it's squaring, about how we're thinking about how maybe we just want to escape and don't want to deal with people. And so there's something about, because the Navamsa there is Libra, and has this theme of socialness, or it could be antisocial. So there's something about how, that Sun and Neptune, with this trade and with the money and the advice, that it's definitely going to, like, one country's legislation is not going to agree with another country's legislation. There's going to be this anti-social and conflict, because it's squaring that happens between countries' different laws. I want to say one other thing, if I can, before I forget, because I didn't write this down earlier, but it just hit me as I was looking at, as Simon was talking about Juno, that Pluto in the sixth house jumps out to me, because as we know, and Simon thankfully mentioned some other themes of Pluto, which one of the themes is Pluto's related to pandemics. And being that the Pluto's in the sixth house here, I think it kind of highlights that we're still going to have some big public issues, or public health issues in the country. We know there was just a meningitis outbreak in the UK that was quite huge right now. They're going through it. In the United States, we've got these smallpox, or is it smallpox? I think measles. Thank you, in the South. So I think this is something just to be aware of, that we may see some big things still happening with diseases worldwide with Pluto in the sixth house.
Actually, something that kind of backs that up a little bit. Specific to the United States, interestingly enough, there has been an increase in syphilis. And it's not on this chart, but the asteroid Eros is currently at 29 degrees of Gemini, tightly square the Sun and Neptune there. And of course, AIA is now reapplying to that degree. So, so I think that may be a factor, an erotic disease. Okay. But also, there's that question of like vitality that Eros brings up, right? And I feel like Eros within the 11th house with AIA heading back toward that degree. She went retrograde for a while, and now she's heading back. I feel like, among other things, that very much relates to the fervor on social media as people are, discussing and researching and revealing the corruption of the leaders. A huge amount of people looking at the Epstein files that has been done online, where people are reviewing these things online and setting up websites specifically to point out certain things. Also, I think that we may see, how can I put this? Certainly the AIA within Gemini does raise concerns about mental health, but also suggests that people who are perhaps neurodivergent figure into challenging the way that we are perceiving authority and the way that we are perceiving the corruption of authority.
Yeah, agreed. Can I say one other thing about the Sun-Neptune thing? So one of the things, I'm not sure if you, Simon, or Robert or Liz have noticed this, but that I've been noticing a lot of people starting new businesses right now because of that Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the first degrees of Aries, because there seems to be some people are taking on greater responsibilities now, and to that Aries concept of enterprising and pioneering. So from a positive standpoint, I think we'll probably see a lot of new businesses right around this period of time, new companies stepping into the fold because of the Saturn, Sun, Neptune conjunction, or more specifically the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. It seems to be a beginning of a lot of new projects, new businesses with that. I'm not sure if you've all seen something similar.
Anything else to add, anybody? Okay, we're going to go on to an aspect pattern called the minor grand trine with Sun in Aries, sextile Juno in Capricorn, and sextile Uranus in Taurus. And I know that we've touched on this a little bit more. So is there anything else anybody would like to add?
I just think it's, April 26th is when Uranus moves into Gemini. And at that point, we have now the complete picture, because right now with Taurus, Taurus is considered a feminine sign. Pluto is in Aquarius, Neptune is in Aries. Those are considered, masculine signs. So once once it moves into Gemini and meets the pure energetics of the possibilities of that mini grand trine, we're going to see things pick up. And that takes us right into July 4th, which is when they start to become very tight within their orb. So I think that April 26th, around then, we're really going to see some motion as far as how this really is going to present itself and manifest once we get that Taurus into Gemini from Uranus. And then we'll see.
Justin, do you have anything to add?
Well, no, I'll wait.
Simon?
I know we got another one coming.
I just want to say that, Uranus in Taurus has it is not a place where Uranus really likes to be, right? It's heavy earth energy. It is a fixed sign. It can feel stuck. And so Uranus, who wants to make big changes and wants to liberate us, operating in this heavy earth, like moving through stone kind of space, its action has been like these seismic rumblings underneath the earth, or this like sudden shift in a fault line, right? But in Gemini is very mobile because it's a mutable sign. It's very responsive. And so I feel like we will be seeing potentially cascades of changes.
Thank you. Okay, and then we have a few other aspects. Mars is trine Jupiter, and Mars is square the natural black moon Lilith in Sagittarius. Simon, you want to start?
Oh, so that Mars trine Jupiter, Jupiter makes things bigger, right? And Mars, of course, does have, is a name for a god of war. Okay, so obviously right now we are in a warlike period, but there's that trine there. There is the potential for action that is based in compassion because it is Mars in Pisces, right? So I feel like that can counteract some of the warlike associations that we see come with it, but we're also going to potentially see people who are engaged in conflict over ideology again, because Pisces very much can relate to faith. It's ruled by Jupiter traditionally, and Jupiter in Cancer, expands our concern with what is close to us, with our community, with our family, and can make us desire to be self-protective, right? So I feel like, yes, on one hand, there's this potential for aggression, and at the same time, this need to kind of double down on taking care of our own. And that can either go with being warlike about it, or also these people who are fighting against that, taking action against that kind of hostility.
I also think that Mars does not like to be in the sign of Pisces, and war is going to be confusing and delusional and not clear. And that lack of clarity is going to help Jupiter in Cancer really enact laws within the legislation to help the family unit, especially with it in Cancer. So you're going to see just the nature of Mars being in that Piscean sign, and this not being clear or direct or approved of or functional. That kind of confusing chaos that will come from the warlike qualities that we're seeing right now are going to help legislations empower the family.
You know, go ahead, Simon.
I do also want to mention that as Mars heads into the last decan of the last 10 degrees of Pisces, Mars will be in his own phase and terms at that point. And so that is an empowered Mars despite being in Pisces. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that doesn't mean good or bad. It just means a more active Mars within that space, right?
Yeah. Something you said earlier, Simon, and I think it kind of jumped out to me, if I had to put a big theme on the chart, there is definitely a theme a lot here with commerce. The part of fortune in the second house, and all of the sun and all of that in the eighth house. And one of the things that there is an association, especially with Mars is in Pisces, with ships and boat captains. And so I think we're going to continue to see sort of this, like, for example, Iran is only letting certain countries go through. So that's okay, which tribe am I going to let go? That Jupiter in Cancer, which tribe am I going to let through the Strait of Hormuz? So I think it's definitely a really easy flow of emotions around family. And this is what was interesting when I was doing some research on this Jupiter at the 15 degrees Cancer. If we look at the Sabian symbol, it's kind of interesting because there's this theme. It's the Sabian symbol where the person's studying a Mandela, dealing with the integration of personality in that. So if we abstractly kind of look at that, there's something about how in this time, because I think we're all kind of going through this, in this time of tribalism, which we kind of see happening, people are kind of going into their separate corners. There's something around how we are learning or understanding the concepts around family or tribalism. There's some deeper spiritual meaning of what we are learning about the history, because there's a history aspect with Jupiter and Cancer as well, genealogy, history, and tribalism. And I think this is a time when we're more apt to look at history or wanting things to go back the way they were with the Jupiter and Cancer, right? And I think it just brings up some bigger issues around that Jupiter and Cancer as to how we are healthily, I don't think that's a word, but healthy, the health of how we're looking at who we're aligning with Jupiter and Cancer. And so that kind of jumped out when we tried. And one other thing I was going to say from a mundane thing, and I mentioned this offline, but I'll bring it online, is that Iran actually has their Mars in Pisces and their Jupiter in Cancer. So Iran is about ready to have a Mars return and a Jupiter return. The Mars return actually happens on April 3rd. So you want to look at April 1st, which is actually the birth of the country, through April 4th. So I think that we'll see something interesting around the conflict around those dates. And their Jupiter return is on June 25th. So just kind of something to kind of keep in the back of the mind as we're watching what's happening in the world.
Yeah, and just to close out the chart, I think for the listeners, one thing to understand about mundane astrology is that it often points out very literal things. And this is a universal chart. This is for the whole world. So when we're talking about Mars and Pisces, a war that involves the sea or the ocean is very, very on script for a mundane chart, especially with Pisces. So yeah, I think this, that Strait of Hormuz stuff is going to really affect the entire world. So that's a really great insight, Justin.
So also, I do want to touch on that Mars square Lilith, because anytime that we are looking at Lilith, we are looking at themes of demonization, alienation, rejection, and also people digging in their heels and saying no. Lilith is about refusal, among other things. Okay. And so I do feel like there are people who are already very not thrilled with this whole war thing going on. But also, I do feel like there is that continuing pattern, again, of ideological conflict and the demonization of other based on ideology. Okay. Note that here we see Lilith is in the 4th house, right? So there is that disruption of home and family. There is also, quite frankly, that Lilith is associated with the death of children. And we have continued to see that be part of both the war in Iran and also, the mistreatment of refugee or immigrant children in the United States. And we may see it elsewhere as well. Concerns about the treatment of children. I do think it is notable that square between Mars and Lilith, they're forming a T-square with that part of Fortune. And, the part of Fortune is neither good nor bad inherently, right? It is both Fortuna Bona and Fortuna Mala. It is both good and bad. It is the things that happen to us as opposed to the things that we direct through our will. And so we may see, there's that potential for accidents resulting from ideological hostility.
Anybody else have anything to add?
Yeah, I Simon reminded me of something. Good astuteness with the children there. I agree with you what you were saying about the Lilith and the Sagittarius, and it kind of reminded me of. It went back to the Jupiter in Cancer because it is that is representative of family and children, and the fact it's 11th house that we may see not in just one country but maybe several countries. Legislation around children and families, and as a matter of fact, in the United States, we're about ready to have a big Supreme Court case on birthright citizenship, which would relate to that Jupiter in Cancer. So, good time to do legislation to protect children, definitely.
And I think the war will actually help that. I think that the legislation is going to feel like we need to throw them a bone. And that is really going to be the mantra as far as that, like, okay, we know this is, not what the general population wants. What can we give them? Let them eat cake,
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how that French Revolution saying is still relevant today, right?
Yeah. So this is the vibrational astrology, chart. We'll get into that for a minute, but this is more of a humanistic interpretation of what's really going to be happening. And the way I'm really seeing this is like the sun is moving into Aries, and it immediately has to face these two Goliaths of Saturn and Neptune. Mm-hmm. So it's like that warrior entering the battlefield, looking up, being like, okay, and I don't think that the point is to try to fight them. It's to enable our own independence in spite of them. That is really where we're seeing the energy go. And the two most, now this chart that you're looking at, this is a harmonic chart. This is not a natal chart for the moment for any country. What this is this is the 205th harmonic chart. So it's not going to look the same as the other charts that we are looking at because it is based off of it. It is not it. And the two most important harmonic vibrations that we're seeing with this is 31, which is all about having our own idea of what the community or the collective should be, which is really in line with what we just talked about that idea of, I'm looking at all of this happening around me. How can I be my own person and initiate myself as kind of a spiritual warrior right now? And the other one is 205. And I know that sounds like a random number, but really what it is 41 times 5. When we're talking about 5, we're talking about the organic nature of things, the creative nature of things. And 41 is about building bridges. So we're kind of going to be reaching out organically to build bridges to new ideas, thoughts, and paradigms, which is really in line with what Justin was talking about with like new businesses, new ideas. Now, we can see here there's really two major aspects happening within this 205th harmonic chart, and that is the grand trine, obviously, between Moon, Venus, Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto. Now, this kind of changes the nature of the energy. When we're talking about Saturn and Pluto, we're talking about this like obsessive need to get to the root cause of things. Then we throw in Venus and Neptune. It's like we're attracted to magic and the beauty and the spirit of things. And the moon really brings the emotions to it. So we're having this like intense emotional need to kind of break free, get things to be more simplistic, and find our own magic in the world. And we're going to do that through reaching out organically to build bridges to new ideas, thoughts, and paradigms based on our own idea of what the community or the collective should be. So there is this freedom within the constraints that's happening right now, where it's like we've almost gotten to the point where it's just like, might as well do my own thing, you know?
Thank you so much, Robert, for sharing vibrational astrology with us today.
Yeah.
Definitely. That actually kind of reminds me what I was saying about Jupiter, about the socialness. If I'm going to do this with other people, or I'm going to go off and do my own thing. But one thing that jumped out to me on this chart, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on it there, Robert, because you're the vibrational astrology expert here, is that what jumped out to me was because I always wanted to say, okay, what has to be worked on, right? And it's that Mercury in Capricorn opposition with Chiron in Cancer jumped out to me. About the thinking and the emotions, and I'm just curious what your thoughts are on it from vibrational astrology.
Well, I mean, from a vibrational astrology standpoint, Chiron is more about our talents and the things that we can gift to the world. And there is a relationship there. There is a circuit between Mercury, Jupiter, and Chiron. So this is really about communicating big ideas of what we can bring to the world. Now, the other thing about Chiron, though, is that it's really interesting is that we have that quincunx between them, between Pluto and the moon and that Chiron. So, any time that we see the moon and the Pluto in a pairing, it's going to be intense emotions. It's going to be an intense response. So a quincunx really makes us make a choice. And it's something we need to work on. It's, do we choose to be the gift or to give our gift to the world, or do we choose to just really focus in on these intense emotions that we're feeling right now? And the key is really with Jupiter, with Mercury there, forming that circuit there, that would be called a talent triangle, that we really need to, communicate in big ways what we need, get out there, communicate to the world our gifts. And again, this is just when you mention like people starting new businesses, pulling, new ideas from the ether and putting structure to them. It's so in line with what's happening with the vibrational astrology for here. It's really that idea of being the warrior who looks at all of this and says, I'm going to just do my own thing right now.
But I also feel like there is that, both in connection with this chart and with the ingress chart, that doing our own thing right now is still rooted in family and community. And I feel like that works very well with what we've been seeing in terms of mutual aid networks and community organizing, especially Minnesota, of course, obviously has been, people looking at that, seeing what's been going on, but there's been amazing community organization for people to take care of like basic needs, to make sure that everybody has food, has the supplies they need, feels like they have backup from their neighbors. And I think that these charts give us that potential to see more of that happening as people look at the big stuff, those big Saturn Neptune concerns, and say, okay, I might not be able to deal with that Goliath right now, but I can link arms with my neighbors, and we can effectively, push that back.
Yeah, keep in mind this isn't a natal chart, so this is all within the context of that reaching out organically to build bridges to new ideas, thoughts, and paradigms. So that makes total sense with what you're saying. It's but it's not going to be something where you're called to it. Somebody's going to tell you what to do. You just have to kind of go out in the world and find it. That's the nature of that 5 times 41. The 5 is the explorer. The 5 is going out there and just kind of doing things and letting them happen. So the universe is really behind us with this, with this ingress into the equinox, about reaching out organically and building those bridges to new ideas, thoughts, and paradigms.
Simon said something that jumped out to me here. She was talking about kind of leaning more into the nurturing aspect of this chart, and that also kind of reminded me of because that opposition between Capricorn and Cancer is very parental and nurturing, especially with the Mercury in Capricorn and Chiron in Cancer. So what you were talking about, supporting others, what Simon's talking about, supporting others, and that nurturing aspect seems to be sort of also to me a theme there around. We're not just starting these new things, but we're helping other people, nurturing other people along, and supporting other people with this creativity of saying Chiron there in Cancer and Mercury and Capricorn.
It makes sense, but the signs have a little bit of a different meaning in vibrational astrology, whereas Capricorn is really about witness consciousness. It's about the ability to see what others need and to fulfill that. And Cancer really does mean it is our cosmic egg. It's those things that we allow to be permeable and those things that we allow in. So that does really resonate with what you're saying, though, as far as like having the ability to see what others need and then using our talents to kind of, open up our cosmic egg and allow others in.
Thank you. And Justin added the spring equinox chart for Washington, D.C. So the sun in the 11th house, the ascendant is 13 Gemini, the midheaven is 20 Aquarius, March 20th at 10:46 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Anything else you want to mention about this chart, Justin, or anybody else?
A couple things. One thing I wanted to point out that jumped out to me here was this really kind of zones in more on that Mercury North Node, or Rahu, the demon's head conjunction there, which has an element in Pisces and then the Shaktra and the Vedic. Mars and Pisces can also be very valorization. I'm going to follow my sword for you. It's the warrior that wants to sacrifice itself for something, or maybe play that role archetypically. And then with Mercury there can be sort of this the communications about that, or the victimization as well, can be a darker aspect of that, or more of a darker emotional aspect. But it also can be some harsh speech, because we see Mars close to that North Node, Rahu and Mercury. And so that jumped out to me because it is in the 10th house. So I think because this is the U.S. chart for the next 6 months, we're going to continue to see authority figures have conflict and a lot of harsh speech and playing people's emotions here. And I think also the leaders will be involved not only in conflict, but war with that. That was one thing I thought. I'd be curious what other people think about this.
Mercury being conjoining the North Node, or Rahu there. Note that it's retrograde. Review of information. Again, going back to the Epstein files. I think that this really emphasizes that is not an issue that is going away. Also, I would like to point out that we've got Mars square the ascendant here, and the ascendant here is, I just double checked, it's 1 degree away from the US descendant. And so I really think this again emphasizes warfare and challenging interactions with others, conflict with others. So, yeah, and note that in this chart, this puts Lilith at the descendant of this chart, and therefore at the ascendant of the US chart. And so, again, there's issues of demonization, alienation, refusal. Okay. Yeah, there's definitely this sense of the United States on the world stage being in some ways rejected by allies. Okay. And are we going to continue to engage in this, or more to the point, are our leaders going to continue to engage in this obstreperous kind of behavior, with Mars in the 10th there, squaring off against the ascendant-descendant line and squaring off against Lilith? I would say yes. So,
yeah. Something else that jumped out to me was the Pluto in the 9th house here, because, Pluto, that, of course, that house represents the judiciary. And, at that degree of Aquarius and the Sabian symbols really speaks to this transpersonal responsibility of playing its role. It's the masked man within a play. And so it's interesting here as we see the 3 branches of government is that this branch is still playing a big role here with Pluto there, meaning like we're going to continue to see the courts play a real major role. As a matter of fact, the Supreme Court has some really big things coming out. They always announce things right at the end of June or 1st of July. And of course, we've got some big cases like birthright citizenship, transgender rights, and some more tariff stories. So I thought that was really quite interesting with Pluto being in the 9th house. So the judiciary still taking on a major role.
Could also see that a new Supreme Court justice moving into the fray with that Pluto there. The kind of death and rebirth of a new player on the field. And as a Scorpio rising, the first thing I always look at in these mundane charts is that 12th house and what are they hiding from us. And I think that they're going to be continuing to hide that Uranus and Taurus, which is what is the actual financial situation of this country. They've been doing a lot of things to try to, cook the books a little, push things under the rug, make them hidden, make them unseen. And I think that's going to continue to be a theme. And it's going to really bite us in the butt, I think, in the long term.
Yeah,
also, that Uranus there suggests to me technological manipulation. In particular, I am thinking companies like Palantir, and note that Pluto in the 9th house could also relate to the influence of oligarchs upon the courts.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, when I saw it, and to both of your points, oligarchs, the billionaires, and then of course the secret monies. If you put that's the house of prisons, we know that ICE is going out and opening all these detention centers and prisons. And there's a lot of money and hidden money and public and private that are playing out with that. So. And then, of course, the moon in the 11th house there with Chiron. I think that, again, we look at the moon as can also represent women's issues. I think women's issues are going to be still with coming up with legislation there with that. That also kind of jumped out to me.
That actually also figures in with Lilith at the descendant. I and other astrologers have long had a theory that the current power structure is likely to run afoul of past mistreatment of women. And lo and behold, here we have, the Epstein files and all that whole huge can of worms. I very much think that that women in particular are really fed up.
Right.
And particularly with the moon and Venus there in the 11th house. We have this packed 11th house. And what we're seeing in terms of, people, whether it is on social media or whether it is among, community activists, what we are seeing is a level of people being so pissed off, so fed up, and really focused on how do we change, how do we deal with the damage caused by patriarchy and oligarchy, okay? And this abuse of women and children in particular. I do also want to point out we've got Sedna there in the 12th house. And Sedna very much relates to victimization, okay? But also, how do we come back from victimization? How do we reclaim our power? And so, among other things, continuing to not allow these detention centers to go under the radar is part of that process of the community trying to reclaim power and say, no, you can't just do this stuff under the cover of darkness. We need to see, the conditions of the people being held. We need to see what's going on with the women and children there. So I don't feel like, even though there's themes of victimization here, I don't think that just means, oh, we got to give up. I feel like there is this process of transformation that is occurring within the public, as we see with that packed 11th house that says we can be empowered.
Yeah, I also, now that you mentioned the Sedna and the Uranus there in Taurus, I could see data centers falling in under that. You literally said the word power. Kind of the secret cost of what these data centers are going to do. And, I live in a very rural area where they are building a data center, and our power costs have gone up quite a bit already. So I could, that is like a prison for some people, for rural people.
Yeah.
Is, that is one of the bills you have to pay every month, if you want to maintain your life. And, the idea of reclaiming your power in a hidden structures where Uranus is affecting very Theresian things, just basic heat, comfort, things that you need to sustain the body, will be another theme that occurs this year as well.
Well, especially with Saturn up there in that 11th house, Saturn relating to farmers, the causes that affect, the situations that affect people in rural areas in particular. I definitely think that's a big factor. And we've got, this sun is tightly sextile that Vesta. And so shining a light on what needs to be done in order to address that kind of victimization.
Yeah. I know it's not on this chart, but Pholus is in Capricorn. Pholus is in Capricorn in the 8th house here, and it's squaring that Aries. And so Pholus in the 8th house to me really again spoke to the whole issue that the structure of our financial connection with countries is changing, the underlying structure, because Pholus is there in 8th house, and it's going to continue because there's another asteroid next to it called Daedalus, which is about construction. And so we're going through this whole restructuring of structure with money between countries and everything else, but it's going to square some of the legislation and how the American public is feeling, because it seems to be there's going to be definitely a focus as we move closer to the election towards what is the legislation, what are our politicians doing for us, or not doing for us with all that in the 11th house. So
Voltus is conjunct the TNO, KOR, and squaring the TNO Make, who is in Libra at this time, forming a T square with Lelia Kohunoa. And so they're doing this big, there's this sense of environmental issues are a big factor. And also, what are the things that we're doing where we're trying to build a particular type of society, but if we're being short-sighted, things like the data centers that are trying to build one form of society may end up, being destructive to very important forms of society or social concerns, like farming, like water, like our power supply. So
but I think all that Aries definitely empowers people, could empower people with legislation, with all that Aries.
And that community activism, it's in the 11th house.
Yeah.
So Justin's going to share with us the Vedic Lunar New Year.
So it just so happens that the Vedic Lunar Year is on this Aries ingress, and I wasn't going to share this, but then the theme of it really spoke to me. So in Vedic lunar solar year cycle, there's a 60-year cycle, and they go through, and in Vedic and Hinduism, they name usually years and ages, the Yuga age and so on and so forth. But we are in the 40th year of the 60th cycle, and this year was named the Parabhava. And Parabhava is represents or can be understood as a period where external forces challenge us and push us towards transformation and growth. Because para really means stuff, external forces outside our control, and bhava is how we respond to that, or our contentment, or our state. And so Parabhava represents the breaking of ego and illusions as we go through this period of upheaval. And some of the remedies or suggestions as we go through these periods of external forces outside our control is really reflecting on past actions, correcting any mistakes, becoming more humble and grounded, and strengthening our resilience and inner wisdom. And supposedly when we go through these years like this of Parabhava, it's to lead us to greater awareness, long-term growth, and spiritual evolution. So I just wanted to share that with everybody.
Thank you, Justin. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us live today and those that come back and join us later and watch. And I want to thank Robert, Justin, and Madam Simon for being here with us today. And we will be back as the Cosmic Connections team next month doing a relationship podcast. So we hope that you'll come back and see us. And Robert, can you tell us about your slide here?
Yeah, we are doing our Magus Druid gathering again this year. It's in Gore, Virginia. It'll be in the middle of May. You can go to magisgathering.org to get on the wait list. We had our first successful Fractal Cosmos last year, which was the first vibrational astrology gathering. We are doing it again. This time we're doing it in November. We want to put a little bit of distance between us and UAC. I do the Turning Season Vibrational Astrology podcast with Linda Berry on Talk Cosmos. And Justin and I, we've taken a little break, but I think eventually we'll get back to the U.S. global currents, astrological perspective on more of the mundane things that are going to be happening within the world.
Yeah.
Simon?
So, as Liz mentioned before, I am a visionary artist. I do a lot of artwork based in both astrological transits and custom astrological art for my patrons. So you can find me on Patreon doing that. I also write about, the astrology that is informing my artwork. And You can find me there. You can also find me at my website, iconalchemy.com, because I am a consulting astrologer like others here. And so if you wish to schedule a consultation, please visit my website.
Justin?
Yeah, so I'm also a consulting astrologer, and I write a weekly horoscope for the Port Townsend, Washington Leader newspaper. So you can oh, that's the dog. So anyway, you can go out to the Port Townsend Leader newspaper, and you can read my weekly horoscope that I write. And most of my YouTube videos are out there, so you can find me on YouTube at Astrological Yogi.
So we all are consulting astrologers, have newsletters and YouTube channels. So we always appreciate you following us and liking us and contacting us for a consultation. I have a variety of other shows in the archives that you can go back and watch. And then there's a new show or two every week. So we look forward to having you join us in the future. And I want to thank our sponsor, Astro Peregrine Software, an astrology software for Mac and Windows. And you can find more information at astroperegrine.com. And thank you, team, for joining me. It's always a pleasure working with all of you. And we're going to say goodbye for now and see everybody next time. Thanks. Bye.